God damn it, Blizzard. Okay, so I'm guessing if you're clicking on this video, it's because either you want to quit, but you find it hard to quit because you don't have like a good reason, or you're unsure why you feel like you want to quit, or you're kind of on the fence about it. And because if you are gonna like just keep playing the game, why would you click on a video titled "Should you quit WoW?" And so I think that the answer to that is a resounding yes, you should quit playing World of Warcraft. And the reason I think that comes down to three major reasons. One, okay, is because it's not fun anymore. And this is actually a main reason I was going to stop playing after this expansion. You know, I had said like going into this, like, yeah, I'll try WoW again. The expansion's kind of fun. And then it took 19 fucking years for them to release 9.1. So yeah, that pissed me off a lot. And then after that, or even during these like patches, it was like super boring to even play. Like the only fun thing for me was pushing Mythic Plus, PvP, and raiding. And I'll get into those things later about why I still don't think those are that fun anyway. Two, the company doesn't give a fuck about anything. Either they don't give a fuck, or they're super, super incompetent at everything they do. So I'll get into that later as well, but that's another major reason, and probably I was going to quit after this patch. And then three, the fucking big boy here is that big ass fucking scandal about the state of California suing Activision Blizzard for sexual misconduct. And I'm not going to go into too many details about the allegations there because I think they're horrific. I don't like talking about them. They make me uncomfortable. And there's a bunch of other people who have already made videos about those detailing them way better than I ever could. So go watch those. But let's get into these main reasons for why I think you should quit playing World of Warcraft. So, number one, the game isn't fun anymore. It's not fun. It's not fun for casual players, and it's not fun for high-end players. If we look at the casual players, what do the casual players even have to do in the game right now? There's Korthia, which is incredibly small, and the quest line there is incredibly short. And yeah, they have their 3 dailies, which are boring. They're usually just like go fetch quests or go kill this quest. And then you have your rares, which once you've killed the rare, it's not even hard to kill for one. You just get a random fucking group together and they can figure it out. Once you've killed the rare, it's like, well, now it's not new anymore. And then two, you have like to go collect chests every day. And that even ties into player power later, which is incredibly boring. But either way, what do you do as a casual player? You can try to push some like Mythic Plus content, I guess, but if you're a casual player, you're probably finding it hard to do that anyway. And if you're already pushing Mythic Plus at 9.0, 9.1 is not going to be different, especially if you're not getting up to 10s where you get to try the seasonal affix. So if you're a casual player, what are you even doing in the game anymore? There's nothing to do. Even the collectibles are boring. Okay? Even the collectibles are boring. If you look at the mounts that they release, 90% of them are reskins. I could put a link down in the description for Asmon's video going through all the reskin mounts that he viewed. So, I don't know what you do if you're casual. If you're a high-end player, there's a lot more stuff that you can do. There's so much more stuff that you can do than if you're a casual player. So one, you can kind of do like raiding. And I think the raid, like functionally, was really good. So personally, I was 10 out of 10 heroic last tier, and I was 3 out of 10 mythic. But currently, as of like 3 weeks into this patch, I 8 out of 10 heroic for Sanctum of Domination. So I think that the fights are pretty good, you know? I think the fights are really cool, and they're fun. But there are some problems, okay? The bosses aren't tuned very well. And we saw that pretty severely in the Race to World First, in my opinion. The Race to World First started off being probably one of the best races, I think, that we could have seen. It was so fun to watch. You know, the hit Painsmith, I already made a video about this. Go watch that video if you want to know my actual opinions on Race to World First. But yes, basically, the hit Painsmith, I thought there it was going to be an amazing race. These guilds were going to go back and forth, and it was going to be pretty amazing overall. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. After Painsmith, all of the bosses were just pushovers, including Sylvanas. And Sylvanas' phases were so boring. They're so boring. Like, Painsmith was probably the best designed fight in the entire raid, to be honest. The other fights were fun, but I think Sylvanas as like a fight is good, but then the mythic attributes that they added, Not good. Not good at all. In fact, I think that what they had present in 9-0 with Nathria was incredible. How they couldn't carry that through to Sylvanas, one of the greatest like villains that were ever going to get a fight in the game, and they fucked it up royally. And it pissed me off, to be honest with you. And, that's not all. Then we have, this general class imbalance. And you might say, like, yeah, it's always going to be like that. It's always going to be like that. Sure, it's always going to be like that. But the problem is, when you have this kind of class imbalance, if you want to be like a high-end raider, you either have to have the foresight or the luck to choose the correct class that's going to be good throughout the expansion, or you have to switch to a class that is balanced, okay? And that, unfortunately, means a lot of grinding old content that you hate doing, okay? And I'll go into the like systems that are bad later, but right now, I think that the class imbalance is pretty bad. And in my opinion, it's severe enough to where I would rather go play either a game that without classes, maybe like a shooter or something, or I go play a game where switching between classes isn't that difficult, like Final Fantasy. Okay? So that's how I feel about that. Now, M+, the Mythic Plus kind of scene is good. I think that the new affix is really good. And I think that, the overall like feeling of running through keys and the progression through them is good. What I don't think is good is the overall culture around Mythic Plus. And it's much the same as with raiding. If you're not one of these like top tier classes that, can run through Mythic Plus like easily or more easily, because realistically you could get plus 15s, tyrannical and fortified on any class in the game, any spec in the game, you could do it. Now, it's going to be easier with some specs, true, but the culture on this is toxic. You'll straight up get kicked from a group if you're the wrong class. And of course, I understand. No one wants to like waste time because like someone didn't take the time to pick the correct class. But again, the way that the game is designed, if you want to play one of these correct classes, you have to grind. You have to grind a lot to even get all of the classes up there, because it's not just that you have to level to max. You have to get the legendaries, you have to get the conduits, you have to get the renown. It's a ridiculous amount of grinding that is just annoying, to be honest. It's super annoying to do, and it's not fun, and the player progression because of it feels really bad. And then I think that the PvP system is broken as well. It's hard to find groups. The gear advantage is super annoying later on in the patch and expansion. So maybe right now you'll have a good time doing that, but grinding to high elos is pretty hard. In 9.1, I grinded to 1800 towards the end of the patch. It was really hard because you're going against people that have like high-end gear, or more realistically, you're going against people who are getting hard carried by like glad people because they can spend money in the game and buy a WoW token and get gold and then buy a carry. And it's really annoying. And, I can talk about it as much as I want, but I think it's already been kind of beat to death here. If you want more insight into it, just go look at Stoops TV. Go look at his videos. I'll put a link to his channel in the description. He talks about this a lot. He talks about a lot of the problems with PvP and why it's not the same as it used to be. So that's pretty much it. It's not fun because what do you do as a casual player? Literally nothing. I don't know what you could do as a casual player. And then as a high-end player, you have a lot more to do and it's a lot more fun. But at the end of the day, you clear the raid, you clear your 15s. It starts to get really monotonous and boring, and it's pretty toxic around the culture. And if you want to actually be at the top of the game, you have to do a ridiculous amount of grinding. And it's not fun for most people. And then that leads me into point number 2, which is the fact that Blizzard doesn't care. They don't care at all. Or they're incompetent. It could be both. Not really sure. I mean, if we look at a really minor example recently, I mean, not that recently, but kind of recently in 9.0, they made it so that you could only buy recurring subscriptions, okay? Now, this might not seem like too big of a problem. You're like, oh, so what? They got rid of the one-time purchase subscriptions. But they're basically admitting that their game isn't good enough to hold players who will consistently rebuy the subscription. They have to hope that players are going to forget about their subscription and it'll keep running, okay? That's pretty much what they're admitting here. Now, let's look at something more concrete, like the lore, okay? Now, I think the writers are probably some of the most incompetent people in the entire Blizzard company. How the fuck they've gone this far without being fired is amazing to me, because their story has just gone completely downhill, and I want to look at the Sylvanas cinematic specifically, okay? So when you fight Sylvanas and beat her, okay, she turns on the jailer traps everyone, and then he's like, nah, fuck it, gives Sylvanas her soul back and dipsets, okay? None of that makes any sense. Did Sylvanas, this whole time she's working with the jailer, just think he was gonna like actually not trick people into kind of like serving him? Like, that's his whole shtick. He did it with like Arthas, he did it with Anduin. I mean, he to some degree did it with Sylvanas by promising her some things that were clearly a lie, and his name is the jailer. Like, what the fuck is, like, when you make something so blatantly obvious to the viewers, not just through some like, because we have like knowledge that Sylvanas doesn't have, but to knowledge that's also available to Sylvanas, it really blocks that suspension of disbelief. It's really hard for a person to believe that Sylvanas couldn't understand that that's what's going to happen, and then it really functionally makes this like cinematic fall so flat on its face. It's fucking embarrassing. And I think that like huge lore people in the community like Nobble and Bellular feel the same way. You can go watch their videos. I'll put some links to their thoughts on the cinematic as well, because like it literally just makes no sense. And then the jailer is just like, you know what? I've trapped every single person that could possibly oppose me at all. Let's just let him go and see what happens. No competent person would do that. He didn't even set up like a premise that would make that have any kind of sense at all. He should have subjugated all of them. Like, I don't even think he should have killed them. He should have subjugated all of them, okay? That's probably what realistically would have happened based on what we know about his character. Now, it's possible, you might argue, that there's something about his character that we don't know that would make him want to do that. Okay, it still doesn't make any sense given what we do know, and if you make it make sense way later on, then it just seems like a retcon. So why don't you make it make sense now, Blizzard? Why does it have to be this weird thing that absolutely is just so stupid, okay? And then it's so boring to let her live. It's so boring. Why, Blizzard? Let a main character just die. You let it happen with Garrosh, so why can't you let it happen with Sylvanas? Just let us kill her. It would have made way more sense. Her crimes were so much more severe than Garrosh's, and like, you still are just like, well, we're gonna create this cop out where she gets her full soul, so now is she really culpable for everything that happened? Dude, like, seriously, Blizzard, it's just fucking boring, man. You're like creating these crazy workarounds to keep Sylvanas in the story, and albeit giving her soul back and then asking if that culpability is like possible still, considering that she's not really the same person anymore, is an interesting angle. It would only have been interesting if you hadn't made us hate her so much for so long. If you had just burned down Teldrassil and then immediately the next raid was doing this, fine. That would be a little bit better. But this, where it's like this prolonged thing where she's done these horrible things, you've made us want to kill her for so long, it just feels like a cop-out. It feels bad. It doesn't feel good. Okay? And then, like, look at the, like, actual production of the cinematic itself. Nobody can understand what the jailer's fucking saying, dude. Don't make me turn on the subtitles to understand what a character in your cinematic is saying. Honestly. Like, why? Why would you do that? Please, Blizzard, just think about these things. Have somebody watch it before you release it, because it's just bad. Okay? And then let's look at like how the story splits away from the game content, right? Like, you have people talk about this who are lore nuts. You have to read the books. You have to read some online bullshit. You have to read like comics, and you don't get everything from just playing through the game. Like, you can't get the full story by just playing through the game. And that's a fundamental problem with the way that they've told this Warcraft story. I think it would be completely reasonable if the only thing that was outside of the game was some random tangential stories that didn't matter. I'm talking like super minor characters that they made books about that were interesting. That might be cool. But when you're making full stories about like Sylvanas or, Arthas, and that's like covered in a book and not covered in the games, it makes it really hard for players to even connect with what's happening. Okay? Most people probably have no idea why you went through 50 war chiefs and now you're with some bullshit council that just fucking doesn't even make sense. Okay? It doesn't make sense for the average player. So you need to make it more obvious what's happening in the story so that people can like follow along. Because when you have people disconnected from the story, they're no longer as emotionally involved and they don't really care what happens, right? It's just like, well, this fight is kind of cool. Oh, well, I know who that is. She used to be the war chief. Maybe we're going to kill her. Oh, nope, we didn't kill her. Don't really know what's going on because it's just too complicated to even like go through that. And then we can look at other things that are like gameplay elements, but aren't meaningful for the story. So like you pick a covenant. It means fuck all for the story. Why do you make us do these choices that make no story sense? One, they don't make any sense for the story. And two, they're arbitrary power grabs, okay? So like this borrowed power kind of like mentality that's been going on in WoW for a long time is super bad for the player base. It feels bad when you end an expansion and your powers are taken from you. It feels really, really bad. And now you're making us choose between those powers, where before, like let's look at Legion, you got powers based on your class and spec, but now it's like it's not based on your class and spec. It's not like tied to that identity. Now you have to choose this arbitrarily, and maybe you choose it for lore reasons, like you think like Venthyr's way cooler and you think their cause is better, but then it turns out it's not best for your class, and then like you have to re-roll and then you have to re-grind all of the covenant stuff, and it doesn't even make sense for us to have to choose because they're all united now against the jailer. So it doesn't make any sense that we have to like choose now. We should be able to switch between them at will, lore wise, and then game wise it's just some random shit that you added in the game to make it hard for people to like actually be the best at their class that they can be. And I know you want it to seem like there's meaningful choice, but it's literally not meaningful. The only meaning it has is what abilities do I get this? Do I get to convoke the spirits? Do I get to, soul shape? Like what do I get? That's pretty much all you're thinking about here, and it's not really. It doesn't matter for the quest line. It doesn't matter for the way people talk to you. It means fuck all for the story. And honestly, it just feels really bad. And I know at the end of Shadowlands, you're going to rip those powers away from us. So what's the point, Blizzard? Just make the classes more fun, or give them new powers that are permanent, or make the choice matter. Because it doesn't. And it's kind of annoying that we have to keep dealing with this kind of bullshit. And then Blizzard also doesn't listen to the community, and I can't think of a single time where they did listen to the community, honestly. Like I think the most obvious example is like WoW Classic. Forever they were like, no, you don't want WoW Classic, you don't want WoW. What's the meme, like you think you do but you don't? And it's so embarrassing. And then Classic comes out and it's like one of their most popular releases like since Wrath of the Lich King or whatever. Like, come on, Blizzard, you gotta start listening to the community. Like when they tell you they want something, don't just be like, no you don't. Just give it to them, or like at least give them some taste of it so they can see if they actually want it or not. I mean, like we can look at solo queue for PvP. A lot of the PvPers have been asking for that forever, because it's hard to find games at high levels, because it's going to be the same people, and then finding groups is pretty hard. It's going to be hard to find people at low levels too, because people are way too picky about who they invite to their party. So if you made it a solo queue, that would be way better for the game. That would make way more sense for the game, as far as like a progression system goes, because if I'm sitting in Orbos with the queue open for 50 minutes just trying to find somebody to play a twos or threes game with, then that's not really engagement in your game, is it? It'd be way better if you had a flawed solo queue system where at least I'm playing the game. At least I'm doing something. It feels way better than just sitting there, and fucking doing nothing, right? Like, you gotta listen to the players about some of this stuff. And like, even for like the major things that are problems with the game that people hate, that they just don't care about, like the in-game store mounts, like that is absolutely, I know, I understand that it makes them a lot of money. I understand that there are some like casual players or like even like high-end players who think that the mounts are cool and they like buy them, but honestly, Blizzard, stop fucking doing that. Stop tying this mount to the 6-month sub, or to the 6-month sub, and then acting like it's a free mount. It's not fucking free. You have to buy the 6-month sub. You're locked in for 6 months after that. So stop saying that it's free when it's not free. And then stop incentivizing people to like arbitrarily apply themselves to your game for 6 months for your metrics just so they can get this mount. Because like most of those people, I bet, don't even stay with the game. So stop adding store mounts. And especially stop adding store mounts that are so objectively better than in-game mounts you can get. Look at that mount that they just released for the 6 months of the Raven or whatever it's called, and it has this awesome mount special. It has amazing animations. It has a new skeleton, a new skin, and then look at the mount you get for clearing Mythic Sylvanas. It's literally a reskin. Like, Blizzard, we can see what's happening. We're not stupid. You think like we're dumb, but there's a reason you've lost 30% of your player base over the course of COVID. Like, honestly, please stop doing that with the game. You're actively harming the perception of your game from current, former, and potential players. Stop doing that, please. Okay? And then let's look at other things that they didn't listen to their player base about. Conduit energy. People don't want it in the game. Ian, shut the fuck up about your bullshit about people like, oh, well, we don't want people to just be switching on and off. Who gives a fuck? Okay, the casual players are never gonna see it, and then the high-end players are just gonna stick with one conduit source anyway. You're only harming people who switch between different types of content. You're harming people who go from PvP to Mythic Plus to raiding. Do you really want it so that people can't do all types of content in your game? Is that really how you want people to engage with the game? Only as PvP, only as raiding, only as Mythic Plus, or like they have to switch like weekly? It's too difficult for them to switch like every single week, so you have to make it so that you have this weird cap on their shit. Like, stop doing that too. Like, these weird systems that you implement that no one wants, no one cares about, and it doesn't add anything to the game, and then you spend too much development time trying to like fix like and tweak this little thing that nobody wanted in the first place. Stop, please, for the love of God. And then, if we're on systems that people hate, let's look at Torghast. People call it Choregast for a reason. It's not fun. It feels monotonous. People don't want to keep doing it. And so it's a cool idea. I think Torghast could have been amazing. It's fun. I like the initial idea. But the thing is that when you tie it to a resource that people have to get their legendaries if they want to do anything in the game. Not only if they want to do anything in the game, if they want the player progression to feel meaningful, a legendary is a major part of that. And when you tie it to a system that people don't like, in fact, when you force people to do anything in the game for player progression, it feels bad. You don't want raiders to be forced to do PvP. You want them to consider doing PvP because it's fun. And if they don't want to do PvP, they shouldn't have to. But if you look at the Mythic Raiders, all of them are forced to do PvP because you can't even balance the armor and weapons that you said you were going to balance, but you didn't do enough for. And then, but the same is true for Torghast, okay? With Torghast, you're making every person in the game funnel into this one way of playing that not everybody's going to enjoy, and nobody's going to enjoy if they have to do it repetitively every single week. Every single week, you have to do it multiple times. Why don't you make it so that you get your legendary stuff from the game modes you play? Make it happen from arenas and battlegrounds. Make it happen from raids. Make it happen from Mythic Plus. Don't make me go through Torghast every week just to upgrade my legendary. It's ridiculous. It feels bad. And you knew that people didn't like it. You knew people complained about it all of 9.0, which was 19 years long anyway. So you had infinite time to fix it, and you still fucked up by not fixing it. Blizzard, just remove the requirement of Torghast from the game. Make it an optional thing. Please. People don't want to do it. I know you can fix it. You don't need to wait for a major patch. Do it now. Why the fuck do you not listen to people when they're playing your game? They're telling you why they don't like your game, and then you're like, nope, fuck them. We don't care. It's super annoying. Okay, and then another thing is you literally have zero support for your esports. The one thing where people love your game so much that they'll dedicate every waking hour to playing the game so that they can perfect it, and you just don't give a fuck, okay? The only thing that Blizzard has cared about is like maybe the AWC, which is their Arena World Championship, and maybe their Mythic Plus pushes, okay? The Great Push was an amazing event. Why don't you hold more of those? Why is your prize pool so small? It's pittance. Nobody can make a career off that. Blizzard, if you injected money into your esport, it would be, I believe it would be exponentially more popular because you'd have more people interested in it. Why don't you support the Race to World first? Why do you make the guilds put on this show? Why don't you create your own broadcast for it? I don't understand. I don't understand why you don't do that, Blizzard. Please. You need to like understand how like esports affects the broader audience of the game, not even players, but like people outside the game. Look at like Riot and how they injected money into their esport and how massively popular it is. And then, you know, like tangential to that is the fact that you don't have the global release date or global reset day. Please, like people have been asking for this forever. People have been asking forever. And this person that you talk about that's like, oh, but they like the reset on this time because that's when their guild is most likely to raid. No one gives a fuck. Please, no one actually wants that. Nobody cares when the reset day is. Nobody cares when the reset time is. The only thing that you might make an argument for is if you have the reset time at a time during the day that can interfere with people progging the raid, which is true no matter what time you put the reset time. So it doesn't matter. Just make it the best time you can equally across all regions at the same time so that when we actually do have these Race to World first things, they're way more interesting and people are way more engaged and there's no animosity between the NA and EU fans, because honestly it's kind of just bullshit that you're spewing about there needing to be a separate time and day for the release. And then what else do they not care about? Okay, botting. Botting is a massive problem, at least in Classic, and more than likely within retail. So, how is it that a company of your size can't fix this problem? And I'll tell you why you can't fix it. It's because it comes from your own things that you offer within the game. It comes from you offering a level boost. It comes from you offering the WoW token. These things make it easier for a person who decides that they want a bot to start a new account and just start doing their farming. And the reason it makes it easier is because now it doesn't matter if they get banned. It's a lot easier for them to just like, you know, do their start. And I think that you know that. I think Blizzard knows, and I think they just don't care because it makes them money. That's how I honestly feel, because if they actually cared, they would hire GMs like they used to counteract this. But they don't. They don't do anything about the botting. What has Blizzard done to fix botting ever? At least in a meaningful way. Maybe they release these like mass bans once a year, but to be honest, those people just make a new account. Because if you're not doing it regularly enough to where they're losing money, then they're going to keep botting. Do something more substantive, Blizzard. Like, please, it's a real problem within your game, and it's rampant. Uh, okay, let's look at some of the design problems that they have in the game as well. So they have this problem where they're not bringing in new players. Why can't they bring in new players? I think it's pretty simple, because the game itself is not conducive to new players. The culture, that is. Nobody wants to play. Nobody wants to start a game where they're not welcomed. Why would you want to start a game where you're just roasted and ostracized at all? There's not really a good learning curve because of the way that the expansions have melded into this weird kind of like ramp up into Shadowlands, and then it's like, well, now it's like you start the game, you level up really quick, and then you just start this random storyline. And if you're a new player, you have no idea what's going on in the story. You have no idea what's going on with your class. You have no idea how the game's supposed to work. And then you have no one in the area of starting to teach you the game because everyone's off in Shadowlands doing their thing. So it comes down to this fact that Blizzard has designed the game in a way that doesn't allow new players to interact with older players, and it doesn't allow new players to actually get a grasp on the game and the story before they're launched into Shadowlands or whatever the new expansion is. It's not new player friendly. And I don't know if Blizzard actually cares. Like, I know Asmongold likes to joke a lot about this, like, managed decline, and it honestly might feel like that, because if they're not bringing in new players and they're just hemorrhaging old players, then it is literally a managed decline because no one else is joining. They're not increasing and they're just decreasing. So maybe that is true. Maybe Blizzard literally just wants their game to die, and they, for whatever reason, I'm not sure. Yeah, so let's look at how they implemented the shards and sockets in the new patch. The shards and sockets for this new patch are problematic, to say the least. Okay, so you have 9 shards that you can loot overall, but it's not a guaranteed loot. And if you've already attempted to loot it on any difficulty, you can't try to loot it on another difficult. So if you go into Mythic, you clear everything, and then you want to go down to Heroic, Normal, or LFR, you don't get the opportunity to loot those sockets again. And it's not like, oh, it's a small power increase. It is the most substantial power increase to a player in this current expansion or this current patch that you can have. If you watch my video for the Race to World First, Perfecto, who is a raider on the Echo team who just got World First Sylvanas, he, with his Sims, is actually getting more DPS increase by finishing the Unholy Socket bonus than he is from getting the best weapon in the game for his class. That means that generally the biggest power increase you can have before would have been a weapon upgrade, because they have the highest primary stat, and they actually do other things on top of that, like their damage per second on the item itself is higher. But that itself isn't even enough to compensate for the massive amount of damage increase you get from completing the socket bonus. And so when you make this, not only is it random when the sockets drop, it's random if you get the item that has the socket in it. So now you have, like, if somebody gets unlucky for like 1 week, they're going to be out of the raid, at least in a mythic level, until they can actually get that in there. So of course this problem will balance out over a couple weeks, but if you want to encourage people to play initially and like actually grind initially, you need to make it so that it's like, you should have just made it so that everyone gets the sockets off of any drop, like the gems off of any drop. You don't need to make it so that that's also random. I promise you there's people that are going to leave the game because that they're not getting these drops early on. So why would you design it in a way that is conducive to something where people are going to feel like they're not gaining power at a rate that they should? And I talked about this when I talked about the new player kind of stuff, but Korthia honestly sucks. Nobody wants to go into Korthia and grind 3 dailies and get all their chests and then do the assaults just so they can get their Stygian Embers and their soul shards so that they can upgrade their legendary and upgrade their sockets. It's boring. Stop making everyone grind endlessly for something. Why don't you make it so that the shards drop at upgraded levels from higher difficulties instead? Why do I have to go through and do this endless grind for Soul Ash, for Soul Cinders, for Stygian Ember, for cataloged research? I have to grind all of these things just to be at the peak level of a character player. Like, it's just so weird. It's weird that you have to grind that much in the game just to be at the top. Like, it should be that if I do the top content for the thing I'm interested in, and if I do the top PvP content, I get the best PvP gear. If I do the best raid content, I get the best raid gear. But that's not how it is. You have to do these other things. Like, you have to do Torghast. You have to go grind all of these, like, different currencies. And, like, it would be less severe if it was one currency, or if the currencies were, like, a little bit less monotonous to get. But they're not. They suck to get. They're boring to get. It's not fun. It's just a metric to keep people engaged in the game, so that they can show investors, like, hey, look how many people are playing our game and how often they're playing the game. So I think it's just like this hollow thing that Blizzard tries to do that's really boring. And then let's talk about the systems that they implement, which I kind of talked about earlier with the covenants. But if you look at how they implement these either patch long or expansion long systems and then just immediately throw them out, it kind of sucks, right? Like raids and dungeons mean nothing after the expansion is over. In fact, raids mean nothing after the patch is over. Nobody cares about Nathri anymore, unless you want to go for like transmog, I guess. But as far as like actually like playing through the content, there's no reason for a person to go through there, unless there is some like edge case player who wants all the transmog. And that's true for covenants. At the end of the expansion, covenants are gone. I promise you, Blizzard is just going to remove them, just like they did with the BFA Azrai power, just like they did with the Legion artifacts. After the expansion, gone. Okay. And then let's see what else. Let's see. Yeah, and then we look at the shards. So what they actually promised with the shards was that they would be like a set bonus. They're not. I mean, they're kind of like a set bonus, I guess, in the sense that once you fill them all, they do like a thing together, like that they're kind of like a set bonus, I guess, in a way where once you get them all together, they create a bonus that they don't on their own. So I guess they're like a set bonus in that way. But what people meant when they thought you said, or what people thought you meant when you said set bonus, was they thought that they would get those class specific armor sets that had unique looks and that had unique abilities. Because the way that the sockets work now is essentially you get a DPS increase, you get a health increase. It doesn't fundamentally change the way you play your class, which is kind of what people thought when they heard set bonuses. And apparently they're going to do set bonuses in 9.2, but will they? I don't know. And besides, it doesn't really matter, because after 9.1, who gives a fuck how many of these, how high of a level your shards of domination are, because it's going to be thrown out too. So I don't know what the point of it feels meaningless, right? It feels like I'm literally only doing it for this tier and then it's gone. So yeah, Blizzard, you need to fix that, because it's really honestly boring and annoying that you grind so hard for this like player progression and then it's just immediately thrown out. And it's worse for expansions. For expansions, you could have the best gear in the entire game once the expansion ends, and then the new expansion releases and like the first quest gives you better gear. Blizzard, if you look back at Classic into Burning Crusade, like Nathria gear still mattered all the way to the end, like all the way to pre-raid bis, probably even into raid bis at some points, until like more of the raids come out. So why don't you do something similar? You know, like, why is it that if I grind for like hours and hours and hours a week to get the best gear in the game, it's just thrown out in like, you know, a couple months, or I guess with this patch cycle in like half a year, you know? It just feels like you're just making people kind of do this endless grind where it just keeps them engaged, to be honest. I mean, I already talked about all the mounts and like the skins just being super lazy. If you look at the Keystone Master skin for 9.1, it's literally the Keystone Master skin for 9.0, but it's just reskinned. Albeit the reskin looks cooler than the original, but it's still just a reskin. They didn't make a new skeleton. They didn't make a new anything really. They just like changed some color values. It's not even like they changed the particle effects. It's super lazy. Blizzard, please try harder. I'm so sick of like looking at some of the coolest mounts in the game, realizing they're store mounts, and then just feeling like it's pointless. Like, why do I even want to try to grind for some really cool mounts if they don't exist in the game and they only exist in the store? Stop doing that. And then another big problem with the game is that professions don't mean anything. No one cares if you can create tier 4 legendaries because you just go buy them on the auction house for cheaper than it costs to make them. It costs like exponentially more to level up your stuff than you can sell all the stuff for. If you wanted to level up your profession from making a legendary, let's say leatherworking, if you wanted to level up any single one of the legendaries that you can level up, it would cost you more to buy the materials for every single piece than you could sell it for. That means you're at a loss all the way up, and it takes absolutely forever to level those things up, which you might argue kind of means that the professions are meaningless, except for the professions literally only apply to your legendary. Everything else is either a drop from the game or you get your power from like your socket bonus or your conduits, right? I mean, I guess you can say that like you get professions for like making elixirs and stuff, but because you don't really have to level it up through each expansion anymore, you can just level it up for Shadowlands only. It's really not that hard to just max out like herbalism and alchemy and then just fucking do it yourself. It's not like some person who's like hard specialized in herbalism and alchemy for every expansion has like some upper hand. And I think that's unfortunate. If you look at games coming out now, like if you look at New World, where they've made professions matter significantly, they've made them fun to level up. In fact, you know, and then Final Fantasy also, you can level up every profession, and it does matter all the way through in game. So I don't know why Blizzard can't do something. In fact, Blizzard took out first aid. They literally, not only did they not add a new profession, they took out archaeology. So Blizzard's taken out first aid and archaeology and have just put every other profession to the wayside. You know, it's almost like you could play every single aspect of World of Warcraft in like a queue system. Like, what if instead of just like having to like run around Oribos for, you know, 60 minutes while you fill up for you know, a plus 17, then you just queue into a thing and you're like, well, I can run a plus 17. I've cleared plus 16s on everything. I'm ready for a plus 17. And you just wait in a queue like League of Legends. Like, that would be way better. You just wait in a queue to get into like a mythic raid, because there's no point in running around in the world at all. Like, it doesn't do anything, you know? So yeah, it just feels like their world is meaningless, their story is meaningless, and honestly, I don't think they care. I don't think that they care. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. And then the biggest factor for me quitting, like very recently, I quit this morning, and the biggest reason comes down to this recent scandal. And like I said, their sexual misconduct is wholly disgusting. I don't feel good supporting a company that has this kind of rampant, kind of cultural, misogynistic view of like their employees. I don't want to be associated with their game. I don't want to play their game. I don't want to support the company that allows this to happen. And I will link things to Asmongold's reaction, Preach's reaction, Kira's reaction, any other reaction I think is valuable here, because I don't want to go into depth talking about it because it makes me sick, but they talk about it pretty well, and I think that they have a generalized take that almost everyone can agree with, and that they go into it a lot better than I could. So I'll link those in the description. But if you are going to quit over this or not quit over the scandal, it's a personal choice. So you shouldn't berate someone for not quitting over this, because in the end, there's a lot of people who worked on the game, and most of them are good people. So yes, you're supporting a company, yes, you're supporting a company that has done some bad things, but you're also supporting a lot of good people who did a lot of good work and tried their absolute best and deserve the credit and support for the stuff that they've put in the game.
And it's kind of like this idea of you remove the artist from the art. Once something is produced and made, you kind of have to remove the person who made it, at least sometimes. Like, that's the argument, right? For me, though, I can't continue in good conscience to support this company after such disgusting misconduct has come forward. And that goes both ways. If somebody quits the game because they feel like this isn't okay and they don't want to support this company, don't just say like, oh, well, come on, bro, it's every company, does this, it's always the same, it doesn't really matter if you support them or not, because that's an efficacy issue, right? You're saying like, well, your one subscription doesn't matter to the company, and I'm here to tell you that that's just wrong. It's the same argument that people make for voting. They're like, why would I vote with my one vote doesn't matter? But fundamentally, if your one subscription didn't matter, then they wouldn't try so hard to keep your subscription in the game. Like, when you cancel, like, they have this huge like questionnaire for you to fill out, and they want to know, because they don't want more people to cancel. They're trying to figure out why you're canceling, because they don't want that individual person to cancel. So if your one cancellation didn't matter, then they wouldn't try or care that much. And so when somebody says that it doesn't matter, or that every company is like this, essentially this is an efficacy issue, and you need to think about, it shouldn't matter if like one person individually doesn't make a big of a difference, because I promise you, you're not alone when you think like this. And by unsubscribing, you are being part of the movement that is pushing away from Blizzard, and you're saying, hey, I think what you're doing is wrong, I don't want to support it. And they hear your one individual voice. I promise you they do. Like I said, otherwise they wouldn't try so hard to keep everyone engaged in the game, and they wouldn't try so hard to keep people subscribed with like these weird things where they force you to keep a recurrent subscription and you can't buy just like a single subscription anymore. And as far as the arguments for like, well, other companies do this too, I mean, that's just pure whataboutism. It doesn't matter. It could be that you could be playing two games, and Blizzard could have done this, and the company from the other game could have done something exponentially worse. It doesn't mean that you're wrong for condemning Blizzard for what they did here. So, like, when you're saying like, oh, well, every company does this, it doesn't matter. Even if you made this one stand this one time ever in your whole life and you never did it again for anything else, it doesn't make you a hypocrite. It just means that you did something meaningful. A hypocrite would say you need to unsubscribe and then not unsubscribe themselves. That would be hypocritical. But if someone takes a stand, even if it's just once in their life, they've done something meaningful, and you've done something for yourself and you've done something for the community. So don't let people try to tell you that, oh, well, every game company is like that, because it's kind of irrelevant, because we're not talking about every game company. Like, you might think it's valuable to boycott the gaming industry wholly, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about Blizzard and their misconduct. And it does matter if you boycott Blizzard, because, like I said, your subscription matters to them, and it should matter to you. Where you put your money is essentially a vote for a company, and so you need to have that efficacy in yourself and within the community to believe that every single person who quits their subscription is impacting the company meaningfully. And and I will say that this sexual misconduct and these misogynistic views are pervasive throughout gaming. So if you do believe that this is an issue with gaming and not necessarily with Blizzard, then by all means, like, you can vote with your dollar in your own way. You can boycott gaming entirely, or you can exclusively vet every company that you decide to spend your money on, like, to an unhealthy degree, and then just play those games. So you're fully within your rights to do so, but please don't make fun of someone for quitting a game because of the company did something, and just like writing it off because every company does it. Because honestly, it doesn't matter if every company does it. If you make the stand once, it really does matter. And then another thing I've seen a lot of people do is they've compared this to the Riot scandal. And while I agree that it's similar to what happened with Riot, I think there are some key differences that we really need to talk about here. So for one, the initial Uh, the initial thing that happened to Riot was they had a class action lawsuit for sexism within the workplace. So their lawsuit was for not giving women raises when they should have, not giving women promotion when they should have, and hiring women based on looks rather than ability, and then hiring men rather than women because they're not women. So that's a sexism claim, which was present in the Blizzard lawsuit. But what wasn't necessarily present in the class action lawsuit against Riot was this sexual misconduct and sexual harassment and suicide. Um, and I know that Blizzard has had individual employees sued over sexual misconduct like that, but an individual lawsuit against an employee is not the same as a lawsuit against the company as a whole for its cultural misogyny and cultural sexual misconduct. Those are two wholly different things. It's one thing to have an employee at your company who is like a bad person and does bad things. It's another thing for the state to come in and say, no, your company as a whole is bad and needs to be sued. And that's another thing, is that yes, the DFEH did get involved in the Riot lawsuit, but it was only after Riot had like settled almost in court. Like they'd gone to arbitration, and they were going to do a $10 million payout to the women affected by the lawsuit. And the DFEH came in and said, no, that's not enough. They didn't come in and say, no, you've done worse, or they didn't come in and say, no, we need to launch a further investigation. That's not what they said. They said, no, it needs to be more, and they proposed $400 million or something like that. And those differences on their own should be enough to kind of clear up this like confusion between the two, because honestly, those things are not the same. And if you think they are the same, then please leave a comment and tell me why you think they're the same, because I honestly don't see how they're the same. So maybe you could clear me up on something, or maybe we could have an honest disagreement in the comments and we could sway one another. But even if that's not enough to sway your opinion about the Riot and Blizzard kind of being the same, then I think that their response to the DFEH should be enough to sway your opinion, because I'll just read them and then I'll kind of go over it. So Riot's response to the DFEH was that throughout this process, we focused on reaching a resolution that's fair to everyone involved, while continuing to demonstrate our commitment to the transformative journey we've been on for the past 18 months. We understand that the plaintiff's new counsel needs adequate time to review the proposed settlement agreement, and we respect that. That said, the analysis and discussions which led to the earlier proposed settlement were comprehensive and thorough, and we believe that the proposal was fair and adequate under the circumstances. We're committed to working collectively to reach a resolution that reflects our commitment to move forward together, but it needs to be one that is justified by the underlying facts. It has been our position from the beginning to do the right thing by the plaintiffs as well as Riot, and we will continue to do just that. With respect to the members posited by the DFEH, we'll say again that there is no basis in fact or reason that would justify the level of exposure, and we believe that any assertions to the contrary can simply not be made in good faith. While we acknowledge that there is work that we needed to do to better live up to our values, we have also made clear to our employees that we will defend ourselves against false narratives and unfair claims that do nothing to remedy any hardships of actual class members. So their claim is simply stating that we believe that the numbers that the DFEH came to were not representative of the truth, and we believe that's because they haven't had adequate time to review those numbers. They are taking a defensive stance. Understandable, they're getting attacked by the government. I understand why they're taking a defensive stance. But they are pretty succinct with what they think the problem is and how they plan to address any other further things, and like really culturally what they believe. I mean, it is kind of just like this corporate, like kind of like bullshit almost, but their response is like clearly planned out and intelligent. But when we look at Blizzard's response, What they say is, we value diversity and strive to foster a workplace that offers inclusivity for everyone. There's no place in our company or industry or any industry for sexual misconduct or harassment of any kind. We take every allegation seriously and investigate all claims. In cases related to misconduct, action was taken to address the issue. The DFEH includes distorted and, in many cases, false descriptions of Blizzard's past. We have been extremely cooperative with the DFEH throughout their investigation, including providing them with extensive data and ample documentation, but they refused to inform us what issues they perceived. They were required by law to adequately investigate and to have good faith discussions with us to better understand and to resolve any claims or concerns before going to litigation, but they failed to do so. Instead, they refused to file an inaccurate complaint. Instead, they rushed to file an inaccurate complaint, as we will demonstrate in court. We are sickened by the reprehensible conduct of the DFEH to drag into the complaint the tragic suicide of an employee whose passing has no bearing whatsoever on this case and with no regard for her grieving family. While we find this behavior to be disgraceful and unprofessional, it is unfortunately an example of how they have conducted themselves throughout the course of their investigation. It is this type of irresponsible behavior for unaccountable state bureaucrats that are driving many of the state's best businesses out of California. The picture the DFEH paints is not that Blizzard workplace of today. Over the past several years, and continuing since the initial investigation started, we've made significant changes to address company culture and reflect more diversity within our leadership teams. We've updated our code of conduct to emphasize a strict non-retaliation focus, amplified internal programs and channels for employees to report violations, including the Ask List, which with a confidential integrity hotline, introduced an employee relations team dedicated to investigating employee concerns. We have strengthened our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and combined our employee networks at a global level to provide additional support. Employees must also undergo regular anti-harassment training and have done so for many years. We put tremendous effort in creating fair and rewarding compensation packages and policies that reflect our culture and business, and we strive to pay all employees fairly for equal and substantially similar work. We take a variety of proactive steps to ensure that pay is driven by non-discriminatory factors. For example, we reward and compensate employees based on their performance, and we conduct extensive anti-discrimination trainings, including for those who are part of the compensation process. We are confident in our ability to demonstrate our practices as an equal opportunity employer that fosters a supportive, diverse, and inclusive workplace for our people. And we are committed to continuing this effort in the years to come. It is a shame that the DFEH did not want to engage with us on what they thought they were seeing in their investigation. So, where Riot claimed that, well, we think that the DFEH, their numbers are wrong because they haven't had enough time to investigate or go over those, Blizzard outright says that the DFEH is falsifying information, lying, and creating a narrative that's just not true. So not only are they defensive, they're attacking. Also, they're blaming the state almost. They're saying, this is why companies are leaving California, which it seems pretty bad, right? They're saying, so you think companies are leaving California because they're being held accountable for sexual misconduct? I mean, I don't know. Your claim is kind of ridiculous here, Blizzard. What you should have done is you should have taken the Riot approach and just relaxed and been like, we're sure that this will come out in litigation, which you kind of did say, but you went on to explain so much other stuff. And then you go on to create this weird emotional appeal saying like, oh, you brought up this woman who committed suicide. Just think about their family. But the actual lawsuit itself claims that suicide was a result of your sexual misconduct, or like sexual misconduct on the part of employees, not just one employee, multiple employees at multiple business events at your company. You'd think that a company that's just been served with this insane lawsuit would take more time to consider how that might come off to people, especially when the state is suing you. Do you think the state would sue somebody if they don't have massive receipts to back up their claims? I don't think so. I don't think in the history of ever the DFEH has sued somebody or gone to litigation against a company without substantial evidence. So your response here is very, very hard to swallow, Blizzard. You call the DFEH unprofessional because they didn't tell you what you were being investigated for. I mean, does it really take that hard of a think to understand what they're investigating you for? If you knew that so you claim that you knew these things were happening and that recently you've taken actions to help prevent them. So you did know that. Your claim contradicts itself. Did you or did you not know that these were problems in your workplace? So you say that there's been sexual harassment training within the workforce. Of course there has. There's sexual harassment training in every business, and I'm pretty sure it's required by law in California to have sexual harassment training. Also, you say that you've done all of these amazing things to prevent this culture from being pervasive. Well, then why does it seem so pervasive within your company? Now, of course, it might be that this lawsuit is just frivolous and it just is completely untrue. I find that really hard to believe, especially when you look at like other companies and other lawsuits against Blizzard and Activision that have like resulted in similar things, or at least accusations where it's like, Blizzard, you know that this is a perception within the community of gaming. You know that this is a perception within high levels of business as well. Why would you not think about what people will see when you say these things? When you say, we do anti-discrimination training. Okay, if somebody is going to conduct themselves in a very, sexually harassing way, telling them that it's sexually harassing is most of the time not going to make a difference, especially if it's rampant. Of course, there might be people who don't understand that some things are sexual harassment, but with the allegations from California against your company, these things are like so obvious that if you don't already know that that's sexual misconduct, you're already going to do it. So like that point, completely useless. Okay. And then you look at like, oh, well, our compensation packages are the same. Well, that's just simply not true, is it? Because if those compensation packages were the same, then you wouldn't have these hard receipts from the state. And I'll put the entire lawsuit on the screen, but it's not like these things are unimaginable. Okay. Blizzard, these things are common things within business. These things are easy things to understand within the gaming community. Okay. So please, think about your response. Your response is it's so like petty. You're blaming the state. You're blaming the DFEH. You're blaming, like you're not taking responsibility for your employees and your culture. And you really should have here. You really should have just, even if you think that they lied, you should have bit the bullet and been like, we disagree with the assessment, but that'll come out in litigation. You should have stopped there. You shouldn't have kept going with this weird stuff, saying that it's irresponsible for them to bring up suicide of an employee who allegedly committed suicide because of the misconduct. Like I feel like you either don't understand or you're really just trying to play with the emotions of people here, because I don't know if this statement was vetted by a PR firm, but it doesn't really look like it at all. So yeah. So that's all I have to say on the topic. If you disagree with me, put it in the comment. We can have a discussion. If you agreed with me, please like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And if you think I missed something, go ahead and let me know. And I might make a follow-up video if there's enough things that I can go over. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to look through this video and kind of stick with me till the end. So if you did, thanks. I appreciate it. Peace.